So for the remainder of our discussion, I've asked Stephanie Wolcott to come up and moderate a panel. And this is a panel of your world changers from this morning, just a brief panel. This one will be focused rather than on the what they've been doing, on the how. Coming full circle from Rey Ramsey's exploration of how, back to the beginning, to discuss a little bit more about if you want to make the world different, if you want to make a meaningful difference, how do we do it? And I can't think of anyone better to moderate that panel than Stephanie. Yes, I am biased. But she has spent her entire career in corporate social responsibility, corporate philanthropy, having designed and led Tyco Corporation's corporate philanthropy program, having been a grant-making professional for Alcoa Foundation, working recently with Robert Swan extensively around the world, and a list of other things. So with that, I'd like to invite Stephanie and our panelists back up to the stage for a conversation, and then we'll conclude.
I couldn't help but notice something as our speakers were speaking, and it wasn't quite planned this way. But the title of our session this morning is rather bold and kind of audacious, Changing the World. And we heard from Rey Ramsey about providing housing and closing the digital divide. We heard from Anne about a revolution in a kit for green and bright buildings. We heard from Kimbal about changing the way children eat across America. And we heard from Larry about a super PAC to end all super PACs. These truly are massive missions. But each one of these people works for an incredibly small organization. In fact, if I had to guess, I'd probably say that between all four of them, there's maybe 100 to 150 people. Now, many of you work for very large corporations, and you know that that's what you call an under-resourced team. It's really quite extraordinary. So on this panel today, and I know we don't have that much time, so we'll probably get kicked out, and somebody will probably pull the fire alarm to get us all out of here. But I do want to dig a little bit deeper to find out how, with such a small team of people, these folks are able to create such massive change and scale, transformational scale. So with that, I'm going to dive right into some questions. I'd like to know, first question, what do you feel is something that really worked and what's most important for your success? Anne, you're already shaking your head, so I'll get you first.
I think that we stuck to the big idea of being a product company and a manufacturing company first. It's very easy to let customers kind of lead you down paths, but we fundamentally believe that if we thought about things as a component manufacturer, thought about driving repetition into buildings, driving waste out, that fundamentally we could take cost out and bump quality up. And all those analogies I used earlier with Boeing and Toyota. And what you can't see in the system when you say, oh, how do you deliver so much better looking building in half the time and half the utility bill and for a lower cost, is you can't see that just like you may have two Toyota models in your house and they have the same chassis or gearbox. That's the way that we're driving that kind of platform thinking throughout. So I think, you know, when we were so desperate for sales and in such a difficult cash position, we just never let ourselves get off the fact that the only way we were going to have a breakthrough for the mass market was that we stayed a product company.
Right, and you talk about a different business model being literally a platform.
Yeah.
So you have other partners that are essentially providing their products and you're putting
Yes.
them together and designing them. So.
Yeah, so we have our core platform of our Frog system, which includes our proprietary lighting, Lutron lighting controls, but we like the idea too, kind of like Intel Inside, we're a downstream aggregator. Really great green materials and technology don't find their way to the market, and they don't because for hundreds of years there's been these distribution channels that kind of chop and change margin and really prevent the good stuff from becoming affordable to the masses. So the fact that we integrate all that technology into our building and physically deliver it integrated into our buildings means that it can't get value engineered out, and we're a new sales channel. So what we're finding is a lot of great technologies out there that most people don't think are affordable. We have OEM relationships directly with those companies and can just use our building as a bit of this smartphone for the app or the wrapper.
Awesome, yeah. Right. Rey, when you think about something that worked when you're scaling one of your many, many initiatives that you've been involved in, what's been a key or what's really worked?
I always say to people, am I on? It's about passion, energy. So you know, the obvious is, of course, a value proposition. You know, creating something that's a value proposition, but ultimately you're going to have to sell that proposition to someone, donors, supporters. And so when you're selling it, so it's the substance of selling it, but then it's the style of selling it. And by that I mean the energy and the passion. You know, I would say to people, because I've been on both sides of it, I have been both a funder as well as somebody applying to get money. And if you're bored, they're bored. And if they're bored, they're not funding you. So it's got to be energetic, it's got to be compelling, you know, because you kind of walk in and go, I have a high energy proposition versus I have a high energy proposition and selling it, and having that passion, they're going to get with you because they're underwriting the idea, but they're also underwriting the person. And if you're the carrier of that, that matters.
And you've got to be authentic as
Absolutely.
well, and know your stuff. Kimbal.
I love what both you guys have said. I think I came from the for-profit world and worked in the non-profit space, and I found that, you know, how do I say this, that all of the non-profit funders were just totally clueless and had no idea what they were doing. Literally no idea what they're doing. And I love these guys. I raise a lot of money from these guys. They're awesome. I would tell them to their face they had no idea what they're doing. I think they would agree with me. When I came to folks in Chicago or in national Denver or LA where we work, they would say things like, Kimbal, go prove one and show me that it works. And that is the wrong thing to do. Anyone who's a nonprofit funder, that's the wrong thing to do. The only way that you get any information out of that is you find out in 2017 what you should be doing in 2014. It's just, it's not a very smart path. And I had to go through these conversations every single time I was with a donor and say, look, that just doesn't work. That just doesn't work. Larry, if you do your political reform and they say, well, do a study in November and then decide whether you're going to raise your next fund for 2016, well, you'll be doing it in 2025. And by that time, everyone's forgotten. And so the whole point of the whole structure of nonprofit funding, I mean, these are people that really want to help. And I had to come at it from a very passionate perspective and say, just trust me with this idea. It might fail, but if we do it your way, it's going to fail anyway. And it worked. So I love these guys. I love them all to death. They took a leap of faith with me, and it has become a phenomenal business. It's a nonprofit. No one makes any money out of it, but it's a phenomenal business in the sense that we now have something at scale that we're passionate about, that we're not bored by, which I completely agree. And you do get bored with your own stuff, even in for-profit. Everyone needs to be challenged. But I think passion and sticking to your guns and not listening necessarily to your investors or donors, but doing what you think is right.
Thank you for that. Professor Lessig, your team is extraordinarily small, but you're aiming for no less than overhauling the entire political system in the United States. I kind of envision you over breakfast just eating, saying, oh, I think I'll overhaul the political system in the United States. But I also know that you're going about it in a very smart way. Your organization is called Root Strikers, and you're striking at the root. Could you please explain a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah, so the point, again, that Aaron tried to get me to focus on is something which everybody recognizes when you think about it, that every single one of the important issues is blocked by the structure of the way we fund campaigns. And unless we fix that, we can't fix anything else. I just saw this, I think it's a great film, but it has the same flaw, Fed Up, which is about your issues, about what do we eat? What do we feed our kids? How do we feed our kids food so that they're healthy? And at the root of that is the fact that our political system has been driven to subsidize exactly the wrong kind of food. And until we fix that, you can tell people stop eating sugar all you want, it's just not going to change or address the problem. Global warming, Inconvenient Truth, or Waiting for Superman, any number of these films, they look at it's all the same underlying problem. And until we can step back from it a bit and recognize this common problem, we're not going to be able to address it. And if we step back from it, we can recognize it's actually not a partisan point. Because I could make the argument just as strongly to conservatives. They're not going to get what they want from government, so long as this is the system we've got. Al Gore, when he was vice president, had this idea to deregulate a significant chunk of the telecommunications industry. His chief lobbyist, as he reports it to me, took the idea to Capitol Hill and said, you know, what if we deregulate these guys in the following way? And the response he got was, hell no. If we deregulate these guys, how are we going to ever raise money from them? So you begin to think the government thinks about how broadly it's going to regulate for the purpose of figuring out whose chains it can pull to flush money into the system. So it's not a partisan issue. It's a fundamental issue. And we've got to put our partisan frames down for a minute and just think about how to address this issue first so that we can get back to a government that resolves issues one way or the other, but finally is able to resolve an issue in a sensible way to make progress.
And I think there's an awful lot of people in the audience who would agree with you on that, including myself. And I think what you're talking about is really looking at where that leverage point is and how to create impact and where you can create impact most effectively. And sometimes I used to say, well, ask the question why, and ask the question why 5 times, and then you get back to the point at which, if you address that problem, all of these other problems fix themselves, or at least you create the conditions. So thank you for that. So the next question I want to ask before we're out of time is there something that you guys did that didn't work, and what did you learn from it? Because we like to talk about things that did work and talk about things that didn't work. Or something you'd advise someone not to do.
So first of all, I just need to call it that I am like the eternal optimist. Or maybe I'm just a good marketer, but I rationalize and spin every story into a positive, and I think that's probably the only way you survive startups. But I certainly went in very naively about how to have the right energy and set of responses to attract venture money. I had been good in a big company getting capital. I figured I'd put on my razzmatazz and my dancing shoes, and what I needed to acknowledge is that very important stakeholder group that will say they care about climate change and education reform, cares more about 10x venture returns. And I wasn't painting a story that was compelling enough that said that little Project Frog and 20 people were going to disrupt the $7 trillion, low margin construction dinosaur that was out there. And so it's taken really almost rebuilding some of my my confidence as a business person to really start to realize that, with each kind of, I believe that success begets success, and that with each milestone and successful piece, the other parts of the narrative came together. And so, and I think Mr. Musk here, because when the 2 biggest exits in clean tech are a thermostat and an electric car, that doesn't, hurt Project Frog. Maybe the next one will be a building, but certainly it's taken us some time to paint that picture of how we'll be truly disruptive for all the stakeholders. And it is for the kids, but it's important that we really make sure that that's a compelling story for everybody.
Something that you brought up when Ann and I are working together on a case study on Project Frog and how they've been able to scale for Kellogg. And one of the things that really struck me is your culture of rapid iteration. And so you pilot, you test, you learn, you redo. And how do you kind of instill that within your culture and make it okay to do that rapid iteration process?
Yeah. So we really didn't have much of a choice. When I showed that cost curve earlier, we had to take such a big leap down it that we had to, rent that space, get a 3D printer, and start accelerating that design process. And really, again, that was just the realization that venture was already getting a little impatient with us. The people who had come in for the company in 2008 were kind of a little bit yawning and saying the sales aren't there. And so I think that desperation to stay alive and win. We have we're tracking a rolling number. We have about 4.5 million people frogged, which means 4.5 million people have walked in a frog or experienced one. And so that rally cry of having tens and hundreds of millions kept us going. But we had to also create, so we needed the time urgency, but then we had to create physical space for our team to have the license to get on with it. But you can do all that cheaply. That it costs a lot. It's a lot less to buy a 3D printer and have it inside your office than it does to have 2 tech shop seats. So these are not things that cost a lot of money. We always have been historically very cash constrained. So this notion that to adopt some of that thinking is a big R&D investment is just not that way anymore.
Great, thank you. So knowing that we are getting short on time, one of our pillars is community. And so I'd like to ask each one of you, what does community or collaboration mean to you, and how have you used it to help scale?
Yeah, I would say collaboration is just one of those vital aspects for doing anything, and I can't think of anything that was not achieved unless there were collaboration, quite frankly. Across sectors sometimes, people that you didn't know, people sometimes that you didn't expect you were going to collaborate with, and it's always about having the willingness to ask, and it's actually, a lot of it is asking for help and being willing to ask for help in places that you wouldn't always know it. Now, the door gets slammed in your face. I'll never forget someone early on when I started One Economy Corporation out of a basement. This guy had said to me, I commit X dollars to you for sure. I show up in his office. He announces to me that what I'm proposing to do is, quote, ridiculous. And then but I needed the money badly. I said, well, will you take a flyer on me? And he said, no. I pitched anyway. He smiled and got me out of his office. But 2 years later, he gave us money because we wouldn't stop asking. So just being willing to go back and go back and go back. But there's collaboration aplenty. And then just real quick, I just wanted to say with what Larry was talking about, having run a political organization in Washington, D.C., in the area of money, and I know you're familiar with TechNet, I just want to put an exclamation mark on what you're describing, because you would sit in the room with people talking passionately about issues from cybersecurity to other issues, and then they get this glazed look at their face when I often would refer to myself at that time as a human ATM, because they were only interested in the money, and it was on both sides of the aisle.
Thank you.
So I think community for me is really everything. I think when I wake up in the morning, I could be working on food supply or kids in schools or electric vehicles and all that stuff. And if the people around me weren't great, I think I would actually not be very happy. And so I think the idea of community and having that fabric, we work very hard in our restaurants to discourage even takeout. You know, just sit down, meet someone at the bar, we'll get your food to you as quickly as we can, just sit down and eat it. And the serendipity, as you were kind of alluding to earlier, like that serendipity of who you meet, you know, when you're breaking bread with someone, I think that's what it's all about. I think that's what it is all about. And I hope people do that more and more and more.
And didn't you say that restaurateur means?
Means restorer.
Yes.
Yeah, that's Latin.
Yeah. Restaurateur means restore. That's pretty nice. And something else that you mentioned is that you're partnering with what I consider an existing channel. You're partnering with the school system. So that's a way for you as an organization to reach many children.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal distribution. So we reach 600 kids in almost every school we're in on average. So in Chicago, within a year, we reach 60,000 kids, and then we reach another 120,000 parents. We reach another 30,000 teachers. I mean, it's just awesome, and that was the way we discovered if you want to get into a community very quickly, if you want to reach every person in that community, you go through the schools.
And that's something that, if you think about it, when you think about where your audience is or the people that you want to affect already are, if you partner with those existing channels, you can multiply the effect of what you're doing. So that's what I took away from that, which is quite spectacular. And Larry, I was actually one of the people that got your email on May 1st, and it was so simple. It was just an email. And you said May Day. And in the Wolcott family, May Day means you drop everything because someone needs help. And it hit. You had me at hello. I wrote the check. I didn't write the check. I did online in credit card. And it was interesting because every couple days I would check and it would just keep going up, just little by little. And we're not talking about big. It would be amazing to know how many people it took just coming, didn't even know you, just donating for this amazing. So that right there is community I don't even think you knew you had.
No, that's right. But the one thing that Americans are lucky about, and I'm not saying just America, obviously this is true in other countries too, but it is true about us, is that there's a deep idealism in our culture. As we get older, what older means is to learn to forget, to become more realistic about things. But, not far below the surface, there's a deep idealism. And the great fortune I have is the chance to teach young people all the time. And in young people, there's this really outrageous idealism about who we could be able to be, who we should be, what we should aspire to. And what I learned in this experience is that it doesn't take much to remind us of that community. And then to bring people out that no one expected was there. Because again, everybody thought this was going to fail. There was no chance this could win. But when 13,000 people showed up writing virtual checks through their credit cards, 3,500 of whom gave $20 or less. The average contribution was $75. The median was $50. And I had this incredible email from this guy who said, geez, it looks like you're going to meet your goal before the end of the month. I pledged $15, but my debit card only has $6 on it, so could you reduce it to $5 so I don't bounce my check? Is this, there is not another super PAC in the United States that has that guy.
And I kind of want to point out that it wasn't just that, but when the server melted, and I saw it do that, you had a group of people, a group of hackers come together to fix it.
It was amazing. Geeks are my hero. I mean, Aaron was a geek. I mean, these guys, I'm a geek wannabe. I'm not a geek, but I'm a geek wannabe. And it was astonishing because, I just got these emails. This guy said, I do this for a living. I'm happy to head this project. They worked 24/7 for 4 days to basically build a Kickstarter platform from scratch. And they did it. And it is as robust as anything. It's all free software now. Other people can take it and replicate it. But, I was moved beyond measure because, of course, if it were lawyers or accountants, there would have been a different equation to that economy. It's like, but these guys, for free, stepped up and worked 24/7 for that period of time to rebuild it, and that was the most inspirational part of this.
And something that I can't help but notice, you mentioned early in your talk that 96% of Americans think that the way that we do elections is wrong, and 91% think they can't do anything about it, which is pretty amazing. But what you're doing is giving people hope and the ability to do something about it, which is fantastic. And I want to thank each one of the members on our panel, Kimbal, Rey, and Anne, because you're all taking on big challenges and you're showing that we can do something about them. So please join me.
Great to meet you.
Kimbal, you mentioned serendipity. I kind of agree, but not entirely. At the Kin, you might have heard earlier on, we say never leave serendipity to chance. We believe that there's actually something else going on. I don't believe in serendipity. Of course it's related to innovation, but you might remember a guy named Einstein. He said, God doesn't play dice with the universe. Maybe he was right, maybe he was wrong, we don't know. But I happen to think that that serendipity thing you were talking about is actually synchronicity. It's something happening underneath. And that's what we're trying to do here.
My favorite phrase that I've been working on lately is relax, but pay attention.
Great, great. Well, all of you were paying attention. Had you been paying attention, you would have noticed that our friend Rey started with names. I'd like to start with some names of people who are meaningful to me, and I dare say to everyone in this room. Rey Ramsey, Christian Bush, Ted Wright, Ann Hand, Kimbal Musk, Larry Lessig, Stephanie Wolcott. This is not a voyeuristic sport, by the way. You might have noticed that tinge inside your stomach a few times when you listen to these people talk about what they're doing. And sure, it's fun to come and sit around here on Evanston, beautiful Evanston, on one of our few nice days at the lovely Northwestern University and say, oh, wasn't that inspiring and wonderful? Okay, off to life. What are you going to do? You can't do everything. But you know what? Some of you can stick your necks out at corporations and try and make new things happen. Some of you can find that mission and purpose that you filed away one time long ago and pick it up again. Some of you can do the best darn job you can possibly do for the people whom you serve, for the families, the communities, the churches in which you're part of. How can you push the boundaries of yourself? Dreams come true, Christian. Dreams come true. And one of those dreams reminded me recently, I was at Skoll World Forum at Oxford. Jeff Skoll set this up for social entrepreneurs. Extraordinary people, made me feel quite humble. And there was one moment when I felt not only humbled and amazed, but also stupid. Because I've been following the commercialization of space for a little while. Sierra Nevada Space Systems, Mark Sharangelo, the CEO, was with us yesterday, and we appreciate that. SpaceX, of course, is part of that situation. And I had no idea about a few little physicists from NASA who literally found a garage. They actually went out in Silicon Valley and found a garage. It turns out garages are rather expensive in Silicon Valley because a lot of people do this. And they built satellites from mobile phone and digital camera technology, all off-the-shelf technology. They said, could we build satellites that work? And they did. This was called Planet Labs, and I had no idea it was going on. And one of the founders of this company presented not only a quick video and this crazy story about how they've built 28 of these birds. If we could cue the video of Planet Labs, you'll get a sense for what this looks like. And my good friend and colleague here at Kin, Ari Garber, if you know Kin, you know Ari. Thanks, Ari. Thanks for everything. This is a satellite. This is what they call a dove. Not a Vulcan, but a dove. They sent 28 of these up with high-def cameras, and the notion is that these doves will, in low Earth orbit around the world every day, take a photograph, a moving photograph of every location on the planet every day. Their plan is to give these data away to anyone who wants to use them for philanthropic purposes, for educational, intellectual purposes, and to partner with corporations, perhaps one of yours, to use these data in ways that we've never even considered. Now, I don't know what ways we can use these data, but I imagine some of you might have some ideas. These are data we've never had before. These are visions of the world we've never had before in our history. And the story I remember from my childhood was when I learned that my ancestors got on a boat in 1630, a wooden boat, and traveled a month and a half. A percentage of their friends died on that trip to come to a place that they had never been, to leave a place to which they would never return. I'm not as good as that. But at that point, I thought, what world could we find? All worlds have been discovered. This is the world. What worlds are you going to change? Thank you very much for being here with us. To all of our Kinians, let's go back and have lunch. Thanks, Alex.